Wow, what an amazing day.
Hello and welcome to episode 171 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Sigmund Judge, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Devon Dundee, in what is a little bit of a departure. We're recording early, ahead of Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference 2025. We wanted to pip the rumours and leaks that may be coming our way, because this is our annual episode where we do get a little bit competitive with our predictions. And to get us in the mood, Devon, before we get into beta plans, Devon does sports?
I do. It's breaking news, Sigmund. I went to a sporting event. I've said this on the show before. I'm always down to go to a game, watch a game, whatever, as long as it's like a social thing. I don't need to be following any particular team necessarily, but I'm always down to hang out. So I went to a minor league baseball game with family. We have a team a couple of hours from us called the Arkansas Naturals. They played actually another Arkansas team, the Travelers, and so we got to go check out the game. I was really impressed with the whole experience. With it being minor league, I wasn't expecting a super nice stadium, but the seating was great. It was shaded, which was awesome. I wasn't expecting that. And I was really impressed by not only the game and the food and the whole atmosphere. I love hanging out at a baseball game. It's just such a good vibe. But also being a parent of a young child, you got to consider their experience, make sure it's a good time for them as well. And there was a ton of stuff for Noah to do as well. So it was a lot of fun. The home team won, the team that we were rooting for. And yeah, I loved it. So I know that for most people, going to a sporting event may not be that noteworthy. It could just be a regular thing. But for me, it was a special experience. My first time taking Noah to a game. And I loved it and plan on going again soon. So yeah, Devon does sports. It really happened.
When you mentioned this to me, my first response was, I need pictures, or it didn't happen. And I received no pictures, but I was given a little bit of a tidbit. Charlie Brown inspired uniforms? Is that really a thing?
Well, it is for this particular team on this night. So, minor league baseball, they have theme nights. They do special things to try to get the community involved. And John Oliver did a recent story about some of the wild things that some minor league teams do, and it's pretty funny. But the Naturals this particular night had a Peanuts themed night. And I am sorry I didn't get you a picture of the uniforms. I was chasing a toddler, so I didn't get as many pictures as I had hoped. But they were wearing uniforms that were yellow with the black wavy stripe on them, which was very cool. And there was Peanuts themed music the whole night, which again just contributed to the awesome vibe. And Peanuts trivia games between innings. And, of course, exclusive merch and all that great stuff. It was a lot of fun. And, for a huge fan of Peanuts, I couldn't have gone on a better night.
I mean, did you know it ahead, or was this just all coincidence?
It was just a happy accident. Every night is some kind of theme. They'll do fireworks or, different kinds of giveaways and different uniforms. And this night just happened to be Peanuts night and very serendipitous.
Well, a big shout out to the minor leagues. And I'm interested to see how many stages we are away from you becoming a baseball dad and really, come on, Noah, you got to get this strike. We'll see how things progress. One thing is for certain, though, for Peanuts lovers, especially when it comes to Apple TV, we love the screensavers. The whole family love the Peanuts screensavers. I've not reverted back at any point because there's always new screensavers. I'm saying this as a warning because what if something happened to that Peanuts screensaver and your family members got upset with you? Now, I'm not saying that this is something that could happen ahead of, WWDC and the first developer betas that get released, and we all get very excited and want to install the betas on everything. But you might want to be aware and at least have hardware that is specific for the developer betas, even if you're not in app development. Because, we'll do it. So just a little word of warning there. Now, I've got my own hardware specific to the developer betas, which we're expecting on June 9th. Do you have any tips, or have you bought new hardware? Did you get a second Apple Vision Pro just for Vision OS 3?
I did not get a second Vision Pro. I'm actually just going to, have to sacrifice that one to whatever the betas entail, because of course it's my job to cover Vision OS 3. So that one is just going to have to happen. I'll say my personal devices, I've become less and less strict about that. There was a time when every device I just instantly put on the betas, no considerations, no backup plans, no anything. And I received a message from another member of my household who said shared devices need to stay on public releases, which is totally fair. But I think that happened during the iOS 13 cycle when things got pretty rough for a minute during the summer. So any shared devices will stay on public releases, but my personal devices this year, I think I'm going to go back in on the beta train. I've got a second Apple TV in our guest room that we don't use very often. And so if I can figure out a way to get that off the HomeKit network, I don't want it to be a HomeKit hub while it's a beta, but if I can get that off the HomeKit network, then my plan is to put tvOS on that, and that's going to be my testing device there. Not the one in the living room, because you don't want the beta to get in the way of your friends and neighbors or whatever it is that you're streaming at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest tip. And obviously the biggest change last year was the fact that you can select and dedicate what is going to be a hub, so that your HomeKit hub isn't continuously roaming from one device to another, right? The other thing is just take the HomeKit elements off of your Apple TV that maybe is connected to the network, at least beyond testing on the rare occurrence that you need to. I'm very, very excited now. I mean, we had a little bit of a vibe check and we were so worried that things weren't going to work out and we might have to wait until the fall for some big news and some design changes. Mark Gurman put a stop to that. And so I'm very, very excited about whatever new redesign we'll be getting. And, well, look, we'll be getting into that in a little bit. Alongside this week's Apple TV releases and watch list highlights. But we begin this episode with a highlight on the new Owen Wilson golf comedy, Stick.
Bryce Cahill was headed for golf greatness when an on-course meltdown derailed his career. Now struggling to stay afloat, he goes all in to mentor Santi, a teenage phenom with immense potential, and maybe save himself.
I found a kid who swings a golf club like a dream.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs. Tell me you don't want to go on this trip.
I don't want to go on this trip.
Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else. This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan? This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
This golf comedy series is created and showrun by Jason Keller, starring and executive produced by Owen Wilson, also starring Peter Dager, Mark Maron, Mariana Trevino, Lily Kay, Drudy Greer, and Timothy Oliphant, with guest appearances from golf superstars including Colin Morikawa, Keegan Bradley, Max Homa, Wyndham Clark, and more. We'll get into the show in just a second, Sigmund, but I thought we'd start with our own relationships with golf since it plays such a central part in the series. I took lessons growing up as a kid and enjoyed it, but I kind of let it fall away as I found other interests growing up. And I tried to get back into it with some friends a few years ago. And golf is one of those games that I feel like if you don't keep up with it, if you don't keep your skills sharp, it's harder to get back into. At least that's the experience that I had. And so I didn't end up sticking with it as an adult. I haven't played golf in several years now, beyond mini golf, which is a game that I recommend for anyone. It's awesome, but it's just not a part of my life anymore that I'm actively interested in and involved in. But the series did get me to care about golf again, which I think speaks well to it. Do you play golf, or are you a golfer?
I have not. I think as far as it's gone for me is mini golf and maybe a driving range. And there was a point, I'd say early 2000s, where, of course, like NoFX's Fat Mike and Billy Joe Armstrong from Green Day were like really into golf, and I wanted to like get those baggy Vans and those checkered jumpers and do the same thing, but it never really paid off. I think I'm also the only person to ever take a run up on a driving range, and well, I was very, very quickly told not to do that again. Hey ho, I guess I'm not the only person to also be banned from a driving range, because this is a story that, of course, centers around Bryce Cahill, a previous premier golfer who has a meltdown and pretty much his career is over, right? We meet him first, played by the great and disarming and charming Owen Wilson. He soon goes from being a salesman to trying to charm and disarm this young golfer who, on the driving range, he can hear the snap on his swing. And these drives are just awe-inspiring. And I think they bring back something that Bryce Cahill's been missing for such a long, long time, only to really be told to, do one. This is a show that I think lazily, when I looked at the premise, a retired golfer who's trying to rebuild himself by coaching other people through sport, I immediately thought of Ted Lasso. I'm going to say this, and I realise I'm going to sound like a bit of an Apple Originals series shill in this sense, but I actually think this is better than Ted Lasso, but it's very, very different. Ted Lasso, you get these Joker second kind of bombs on you, whilst this is a lot more grounded, a lot more dramatic in a lot of ways, and I think it's probably going to age a lot better thanks to an incredible cast headlined by Owen Wilson and his lovable rogue style that we've all grown accustomed to over the years, alongside his divorcee wife, Judy Greer, who is still encouraging in their relationship, is really, really interesting. And his kind of lovable rogue double, played by Mark Maron, called Mitz. Of course, Mark Maron, I was like, who is that? And I was like, of course, I've been listening to him for years on his podcast, WTF with Mark Maron. So I was really, really happy. And I was very much, WTF, it's Mark Maron. And then, of course, you've got Marianne Trevino from A Man Called Otto as Elena, the mother to the golfing future superstar that is Santi, played by Peter Dager, who, honestly, to begin with, is difficult to get a gauge on him, and the first time we really see his guard down is when he meets Zero at the end of episode 2, played by Lily Kay, a fantastic talent who I've previously been enamored by in Your Honor, and she also had a cameo in the later season of Yellowstone. There's a lot of talent that's been brought together for this that I wasn't expecting. And as soon as I kind of looked up, how do I know these people? Every single talent. I mean, the casting director has performed miracles here. And yeah, it really, really is a special, special show. And a special premiere week, 3 episodes.
And I do think the first 3 episodes are great for setting the baseline of this series. I love that Apple does the multiple episode rollout for the first week and then moves to week for these series that we're just getting to know. You mentioned Lily Kay's introduction. I feel like the ensemble really starts to gel throughout the first couple episodes, but it doesn't become fully cohesive until the introduction of Zero, who really rounds out the ensemble and the dynamics of these characters. I think it's a really fun setup for the series because you've got Elena, who's the protective mother, right? She's managing her son while Price is trying to coach him, but Santi's got his own deal with his father and the history there and some of his past frustrations with the game, which of course Price can relate to. And so I think those are going to be really interesting elements. And then you throw Zero in there as well, and you've got a little bit of maybe like a monkey wrench in the whole dynamic that we think is going to be there. And it's going to make for very interesting and enjoyable TV. To me, what sets the show apart most, and I like what you said about the comparisons to Ted Lasso, but also the way the show's different. There is an innate kindness behind the way the characters relate to each other. There's no villain here. Even when some of the characters are doing things that might be questionable, Price is making money through convincing people to buy golf clubs that they don't really need, and other tricks just to get by throughout this very dark time in his life. But no one is making him out to be the villain, and there's no one who is really antagonizing him. The people in his life are trying to support him, even his ex-wife, which is, I think, is beautiful to see a relationship that can go that direction but still be supportive. And there's just something to Price that makes you want to root for him. There's some hints that there's a lot more to him than just this washed up ex-golfer, right? There's reasons behind the decisions that he's made. And while we find him in this really low place, I think the heart of that character really does shine through, and we see glimpses of who he is and who he can be through his relationship with Santi. So I'm excited to see that dynamic continue to play out. And it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with Santi as a character, because, as you said, it's really hard to understand where he's at. Does he really want to be a golfer? We're going to see his relationship with the game change, I think, throughout the season, and his relationship with Price be tested and change as well. But I think these first 3 episodes set us up for a really compelling series. Lots of golf as well. A game that, again, this show got me to care about. I don't know how you filmed that, because it seems like very hard to nail exactly right. And I'm sure there's some special effects involved, but also just some great athleticism shown on screen as well, which we can always appreciate. So when you put together the cast, the ensemble, the heart, and then the golf of it all, I think you've got a really great mix for a series that we're going to get to watch over the next several weeks play out.
And I'm sorry to go back to Ted Lasso analogies, right? Ted Lasso, we've talked about many, many times, and we've never really talked about it as like a soccer show or a football show, right? And Price Cahill, I don't think, is really a golf show. It's set around the world of golf, but this is about different relationships and I think different stages in life as well. I think that's beautiful. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing where Stick goes, but a really promising 3-episode premiere.
Most definitely. And you can check out that 3-episode premiere today on Apple TV+.
I think it's a statement in the fact that we led this week's episode with Stick in a week of historic proportions. Apple's worldwide developer conference taking place both in Cupertino and also online for free. We had a bit of a vibe check the other week, and we kind of got to the point where we were like, okay, we know new Apple TV hardware is coming at some point. Does that mean that there's going to be a delay in whatever plans there have been for the next version of the OS? But it would appear those fears have gone unfounded, because Mark Gurman of Bloomberg reported just this past week that we can expect some big things to happen for both Apple TV and watchOS alongside iOS, visionOS, iPadOS, and macOS. So I am super, super excited about this. Now, I know a number of shows also give their predictions, but tvOS and Apple TV is normally a bit of an afterthought. And so we're going to change things up a little bit this week, Devon. But before we get to tvOS and Apple TV and our predictions, do you have any overarching thoughts and hopes for this Worldwide Developer Conference this year?
Well, beyond iPad multitasking, it's going to be the year, Sigmund. I really do believe it. My biggest hope is in this redesign across platforms and the way Apple's refreshing the UI on every platform at the same time. We've never seen that before. It's always been a progressive rollout where it usually starts with the iPhone and then spreads out to the other systems. And so I'm really hopeful for some standardization of interaction controls and the experience overall. I feel like Apple does a good job for the most part of, if you use an iPhone, you can pretty much pick up how to use an iPad and a Mac and all these different devices. But I feel like it can be standardized a little bit more. As someone whose brain just thrives on consistency, I think that's something that could be really great if Apple decides to roll it out in that way this year. So I'm putting a lot of my hopes in this redesign. I know that people are always looking for new features and new capabilities, which I hope to see as well. But I'm really interested in what this refreshed design looks like, pulling from Vision OS, which is, of course, an operating system that I care about deeply. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens there and how different all of our device interfaces look here in the fall. What's your big hope for WWDC this year?
I think my biggest takeaway from last year was that Apple Intelligence didn't feel very Apple-y, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever Apple had talked about artificial intelligence, they kind of pointed in the back to the things that we've, I think, taken for granted over the years that happen automatically on device. We talk of Siri as this voice-activated assistant. It is so much more than that in the background. And I felt like Apple really went off course this past year with how Apple Intelligence was being sold, and it really felt like in a lot of ways Apple were trying to mimic what other companies were already doing and had lost a little bit of themselves in the process. Maybe that's harsh and maybe that's not necessarily original, but that's how I felt coming out of it. And I had to kind of hide my disappointment in a lot of ways, I think, looking back. So I'm hoping that this time Apple will take on the idea of Apple Intelligence being more Apple-y, right? And maybe the things that automatically happen for us on device start to propagate in the real world, right? So based on user proximity, based on the things that we do in our everyday lives, and hopefully some of those contextually aware features and that seamlessness does actually come to fruition this year. That I was very, very excited for, but the generative stuff, never going to be a fan of. Maybe it's just me showing my age, but from a company that really nurtured creativity and artistry, it just felt a little bit off course and a little bit off brand for Apple. So we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I think that's my biggest takeaway really for this year. Getting back on course.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I think a lot of eyes are going to be on Apple Intelligence, which we've heard probably won't be as big of a focus this year as they're still finishing up the more personalized Siri. And I think that's going to be the basis for a lot of Apple Intelligence going forward. So they really need to get that right first, and they don't want to overpromise there. But I agree with you. Getting back to features that really benefit users rather than just trying to meet the moment in the sense of what other companies are doing, I think that's something a lot of us would love to see. And yeah, my fingers are crossed for that as well. But hopes aside, it's time for us to actually say what we think is going to happen. Of course, we always play our prediction game every year, get a little bit of competition going on the show segment. This time, 5 Apple TV picks worth 1 point each, 1 out there Apple TV pick worth 2 points. So a potential total of 7 points that we can earn in this game. Maybe one of us will make a sweep this year, Sigmund. We'll have to wait and see. But let's get the predictions started, and I'll go first. With all the rumors of a redesign, I'm thinking we're going to see a TV app style sidebar added to at least one other system app on the Apple TV. When the new sidebar came to the TV app, I said, I hope this is a preview of what's to come for future tvOS design. It's been a minute. We haven't seen it come anywhere else, but I think that element could have been an early foundation of the redesign on tvOS. And so I hope to see other apps redesigned in that way with that kind of navigation, because I think it could work for a lot of apps on the Apple TV.
It's an interesting pick, Devon. I think it's a surefire pick in a lot of ways. Maybe even if it comes to a redesigned settings app, which I know you're waiting for. And I do think we are going to see a bit of an overhaul here. I think it's an obvious pick in a lot of ways, so it's clever. I think you've got it in the bag, Devon. But I'm interested, and I have a little bit of doubt, because I just question the cohesiveness between the Apple TV app team and the tvOS team. The Apple TV app is everywhere, right? And they've had to build something with a navigation that people are used to, because we have the sidebar navigation on Disney Plus, up until recently Netflix, who are about to revert to what Apple did beforehand. And pretty much every streaming app goes down that route. So it would be interesting and I guess a cohesive experience for people that do streaming, but that you're basing the experience really on what everyone else is doing with their streaming apps, which would be a little bit disappointing in my opinion. That said, my first pick is also to do with how it's gonna move away from the default home screen that we've been accustomed to since tvOS launched in 2015. We have these rows of apps, which honestly, nice and easy to navigate, but they feel a little bit dated, a little bit boring. And I'm seeing everyone else kind of take risks, which is really what I want Apple to do. I want Apple to take risks and get creative. And for me, whilst my main pick is that tvOS moves away from the default home screen, I'm going to go a little bit further just in my theorizing here. Something that we've got used to are the previews with the pagination dots, where we can flip between the previews right at the top beyond the rows of apps. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of system where what we actually get are different home views and they can be customized per user. So this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that we have three kind of main home screens. One, which is very much the TV app, but in a different format. And then we can swipe right to something else, or maybe it's a Siri remote control press rather than a swipe that gets us to the next screen, which is gaming. And then the next screen is maybe a mixture of everything, including some personal customization, like a personal configurable dashboard view for the user that's logged in. And that may convince people to finally switch users. So pick one is tvOS moves away from the default home screen.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I would love a reimagining of the home screen. I think the pagination that you mentioned would make a lot of sense and be cohesive with other Apple platforms, which would go along with my hope. Be interesting if they do these three specific kind of home screens, or what exactly that would look like. I'd be most interested, of course, in the configurable one, what you could add there other than third-party apps. Maybe we could get some widgets in there or some other information from our iCloud accounts based on our profiles. But yeah, I think a rethinking of the home screen makes a lot of sense. Now, whether they rethink the home screen or not, my next prediction is concerning the icons that we're going to see on the home screen, because I think we're going to be getting round app icons on the next version of tvOS. And I know that's something that people have gone back and forth on in relation to iOS. And I have to imagine for app makers, it's going to be a bit of a transition if Apple does change the shape of the app icons after all these years, because you're going to have to make new assets. And so it may even be optional or something that like Apple could somehow convert current icons to circular. On visionOS right now, I don't love the solution where you got the little squircle inside basically a bubble. It's cute, but it doesn't necessarily look great alongside the circular app icon. So hopefully that's not the direction it goes. But I'm just thinking that circular app icons might be the next design iteration for the home screens on, of course, tvOS, but also our other devices as well. I could see it, and I think it would be a nice change, something cool, something different, and maybe even an opportunity for app icon designers to try a different approach and do something totally different with their app icons.
I think it makes sense because we're already seeing the circular icons in the sidebar in the TV app. So it wouldn't be hard pushed for it to then be implemented throughout the OS. The one thing that I do find though is like when using Google TV, who a long time ago went down that like circular app style is I don't necessarily think those circular icons work that well on big screens. I think they're great on like sidebars, that kind of thing, but they look a little bit janky, especially if, for example, you're changing the settings in terms of view for accessibility and making icons larger and that kind of thing. It's a worry that I have across all of the OSs, to be quite honest with you. And when you say circular, do you literally mean circles, or are we talking like rounded? I feel like I have to push you on this.
Okay, I'll just go all in on circles like Vision OS. I think that's what it's going to be. That's my thought.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Not too long to wait. But my second pick, Devon, is that Control Center receives parity with iOS, opening up to third parties and customization. So, I'm almost certain that this is coming. Now, if we don't get a personable, configurable dashboard view like I'm hoping for, and that dashboard view would be a joy if that's the first thing you got, especially if you're setting an automation in the morning. Maybe there's a word of the day widget there, so I don't need to go into the app and, it's able to borrow different elements from different apps. It would be fantastic. But Control Center receiving parity with iOS and opening up to third parties and customization, I think would be really, really handy, and it would be another kind of visual clue that you're in the wrong account. I think there are different elements to this. I think also, whilst I do have still third-party apps still installed to view some Apple secure video cameras around the house, I have, of course, been just using the home view within Control Center. So it would be really nice to see the platform just kind of open up to a lot of developers who, let's be honest, have kind of been left behind on the platform. And I think it's just going to be able to open the platform up to so many more use cases as well. Maybe even timers for cooking ahead of whatever that home device is that we've been waiting for. That's what we're going to get first. And I think we're probably going to get a number of hints to what that device, that future device is, through tvOS.
I love the Control Center controls on iOS and iPadOS. I would love to see them come to more platforms, tvOS, macOS as well, maybe even visionOS. I think that'd be awesome. And we've heard in reference to Apple's home device that you're not going to be installing third-party apps on it necessarily. So I think probably, if that's the case, what's going to somehow be happening is the app intents that widgets and controls and shortcuts are based on are somehow going to be transferred via your iCloud account into the home device. And I could see that working very well on the Apple TV as well. So you could get controls for some of your third-party apps that aren't necessarily on the Apple TV, but you could still be able to run things for them using Control Center. So yeah, this is an exciting pick for me. I really hope it happens because the controls are amazing and I want to see them on my Apple TV as well. We've talked a lot about user profile, Sigmund. We do it a lot here on this show. And so I'm going to go ahead and use one of my picks in reference to user profiles. Every few years, we see Apple take another approach at figuring out a way for people to be able to switch their profiles easily and make it sync across not only your Apple TV, but other apps on your device as well. So I'm proposing that there's going to be a new solution for automatically selecting the user profile based on the proximity to other devices in the room. And I just think that this makes so much sense that if you're wearing your Apple Watch or if you've got your iPhone in your hand or your pocket and you turn on the Apple TV and you're the only person in the room, the TV should be able to pick up on that and know who's watching. It gets more complicated when you've got multiple people in the room, but that's where proximity could again come in handy, whoever's closest or things like that. There's been so many attempts at making profile switching easier on Apple TV and making sure that when you turn on the TV, your profile is selected so you're not messing up someone else's up next queue. And I think that using proximity to your other devices is the next step for that. And I'm hopeful that we're going to see it this year.
I am really, really hopeful of this. And I love that this is a pick because this was a previous pick of mine from years gone by. I'm hopeful and I wanted to kind of pick this myself, Devon, but I was worried that I was going too wishlisty on this. One thing that I think would be cool though is, you were talking about multiple users and how that would work. I think it would be really cool because, of course, the TV is your shared screen for the home and we're not always watching by ourselves. So it'd be cool if there was a way of multiple users being able to log in at the same time and then record their history in their watch list. Maybe there's something here. I really hope there is. This is the point I want you to get the most, to be quite honest with you, even as competitive as I am. My third pick for this year is that we finally, and it is a big finally moment, we finally get a live TV EPG introduced, consolidating live feeds from our favourite broadcasters. There are some great apps that already kind of do the job, but aren't completely comprehensive because of the way tvOS works and different regions and everything else. Apple could really do something cool here and maybe even, as we've stated before, integrate a live streaming Apple original channel where maybe you've got older episodes that just is free to all. Amazon have gone down that route with Freevee, so I think it would be clever for Apple. And maybe it would also be a way of them introducing some kind of ad revenue system to their originals as well. But yeah, just a place that brings that traditional way of watching scheduled programming that I think a lot of us miss, and a lot of people just never transitioned away from, and therefore they've lost out on streaming. This could be a way of introducing an older audience to a platform that really everyone should be able to access and enjoy.
Yeah, the Apple TV needs a system-wide live EPG. It's time. And if it happens this fall, it will be soon enough. And so I hope that this happens. I think that actually that desire for appointment programming, watching together, is actually coming back around. It's something that people miss in the age of streaming. And you see with shows like The Last of Us, I mean, people are on social media watching it together live or as close to live as possible on streaming. You hit play at 8 o'clock when it shows up in the app, and you're all mostly watching together. So I think the desire for live programming and that experience is very much felt now. And in addition to a live EPG and Apple maybe even going the freemium route with a live channel that's ad supported, I would love for Apple Original premieres to be live streamed in a way that, of course, with time zones, you're not going to catch everybody. But if we could get a large group of people able to watch this week's episode of Stick together, I think that would be a lot of fun and a nice addition to the live EPG. So that's a little bonus wish in addition to your pick that I do hope to see come true.
I mean, just in addition to that, it will clean up the TV app, whatever that becomes in the next edition of tvOS, because you've got like your live news way at the bottom. You've got Apple Music, their live channel, which I think a lot of people forget about, somewhere in a row somewhere occasionally. So it would just be nice to be able to have that live grid, even for Friday Night Baseball. And, some of those ongoing networks as well. So, yeah, I'm glad you agree. And I hope Apple do as well, enough to introduce it this week.
My next pick pertains to AirPlay, a technology that we love and use all the time. It encompasses a lot of things, but the aspect of it that I use the most is the ability to control speakers and TVs in my home from other devices. And that works great when you're on your local network at home. But when you're away from home, or if there are devices that aren't necessarily in the home network, for example, if something's playing on my iPad, but I'm trying to control it from my iPhone, there are just connection points where that breaks. And so my pick is that AirPlay will expand to the cloud with the ability to monitor and control media playback on all devices on the user's account from each device. So when I'm on my iPhone and I check Control Center, not only will I see my Apple TV and my HomePods, which is great, but I'll see my iPad and my Macs and my Vision Pro and things like that so that I can control playback there. I think it would just make a lot of sense for that feature to be more consistent and cohesive, where it doesn't rely as much on the local network, but it could be done in the cloud, similar to what Spotify does with Spotify Connect, and just the ability to control devices that way. So I think AirPlay is a technology that is so valuable and is always being rethought at Apple and continuing to be pushed. And I think this would make sense for its next iteration moving to the cloud.
So, AirPlay Cloud. Interesting. I did not see this coming at all. And if it does happen, fantastic. Because it actually has been quite a while since we got a new iteration of AirPlay. To the point that I think it's been my prediction of AirPlay 3 for like 2 years running. And I just didn't do it this year because I've kind of given up hope at this point. But yeah, I think it would be really cool. I also hope that AirPlay comes to video in a different form. I know we talked about audio, but we've always talked about that idea of having a show or a game simulcast on multiple displays around the house in sync. Something that I know we always want for like a Super Bowl or another big sports event that you end up watching, Devon. But yeah, I'm poking the bear a little. I know. But hey, Devon does sports now. For my fourth pick, I am going down the competitive route a little bit here because I'm going for a new game center to be announced with Game Center achievements, chat, and more front and center. It may also include integrations with Microsoft and Sony, but definitely not Epic. What do you think?
I think this pick makes a lot of sense. We've been hearing some rumblings about Apple redoing the gaming experience, especially the social side of it on their platforms. And so Game Center is one of those features that offers so much but has not been put in the front and center in the way that I think it should be. And I think there are definitely elements to it that if you made it its own app or its own experience, it could contribute to especially people playing together, knowing when their friends are online, what they're playing, hooking up to play a session together or chat while they're playing, things like that. That makes so much sense. And with Apple's continued reevaluating of the gaming space, and now Apple becoming a game studio owner as of last week, I think this approach would make a lot of sense. And yeah, I don't think Epic's going to be invited to the party right now.
Some other features that I would love to see, because I would love to see FaceTime and iMessage and that kind of thing be embraced a little bit across the board. But, as part of this kind of Game Center refresh, I would like to see some Discord kind of things happen, where, for example, I can spy on what someone's watching. I love the fact that every time I check my Discord, I see that Federico Vittici's been listening to Justin Timberlake or whatever else it might be. So I'd love that. I'd love if there was a way of being able to broadcast what I'm watching as well. So maybe if it's like a live game, a friend knows what I'm watching and can request to just jump in and watch it with me. That kind of thing I think would be really cool. But we're going to start off with gaming in that sense. And we talked about it so many times before. Modern day gaming now revolves around community. I mean, even Nintendo, who've been very hands off with the online aspect and live streaming and that kind of thing, Switch 2 is about to come, and that is the core focus really of this new system. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with my fourth pick. And well, leads us to your fifth and final normal pick before we get to our out there picks.
Well, stop me if you've heard this one before, Sigmund, because I think this has been a pick in years past, but I believe it's the year. I really do, just like I've had multitasking. I believe this is the year that Apple TV gets a full-fledged home app. We've been hearing so many rumblings about Apple's revamped approach to the home. Of course, the hardware is not coming until potentially later this year or early next year, but I think that the software work that Apple's been doing could be ready for this year's tvOS. And so, in anticipation of the home device that Apple has been working on, I think the Apple TV needs full access to the entire home. I love having scenes and cameras in Control Center. I think that makes a lot of sense. But there are times when I just want to check on a particular accessory, or there are things that I'd like to automate on my Apple TV with the Home app that it just isn't possible right now. So I think that a full-fledged Home app for tvOS makes sense with this new push into the home. And even though the hardware is not there, I think the software, the foundation is being laid, and I think we could see it in the fall.
I am surprised. For me, Apple TV and tvOS and the company's kind of thought process on it is, well, we can control everything and we can find out the statuses of all of our accessories through Siri. And the things that we need to see, for example, like light controls and our cameras and that kind of thing, we get access to anyway where it makes contextual sense. We'll have to wait and see, but I don't think we're getting a home app. I think we're going to go down the widgets route, and you're going to be able to decide what comes in from that sense. I don't think we're going to get a standalone app, but maybe we get the options to pull stuff out from what would be a home app on there. And this might just be my thought and my concept for a new tvOS home screen, and so I may be completely wrong here. Based on that, I'm kind of doubling down. I don't think we are, which is going to disappoint a lot of people. But honestly, contextually, I don't see where it makes sense in 2025. But we'll have to wait and see. And they've got to have another reason to sell us on that third home device that's more than likely going to be in the same room as our Apple TV. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. All right, my fifth and final normal pick is that at least one Apple exclusive video player feature expands to third parties with an expanded Apple Intelligence-based Insight and Multi-View top of my personal list, but they are not my picks. The pick is pure and simple. At least one Apple exclusive video player feature expands to third parties and their ability to use them. And honestly, Multi-View is great for sports fans, but come on, let's get the news addicts in. Let's get the Big Brother watchers that, watch the 24-hour streams of Big Brother. Let's get them in as well. Multi-screen's been great, but it's been a missed opportunity if you're not a sports fan.
Yeah, let's get the parents in there as well. For the past few days, my son has been obsessed with moose. He saw a taxidermied moose at a restaurant, and now all he wants to talk about is moose, and he wants to learn as much as he can about them, which is great. I want to encourage. So I've got a Curiosity Stream documentary called The Moose Story. It's great. It follows these moose throughout a year out in nature. But that's been basically all my TV has played over the past few days. And, if I could play something else and have the moose going as well, I wouldn't mind that too much. So, yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. I'd love to see Multi-View come to third-party apps. Insight as well. I think if Apple could nail that down, that would be amazing. But I think that one's maybe a little further out in the future than the Multi-View is.
Well, that I think is all going to depend on our out there picks, Devon. Do you want to go first or shall I?
I think I probably should, because it does relate to what you just said, and it's something we've talked about quite a bit. And my out there pick is that the next version of tvOS, whether it's tvOS 19 or tvOS 26 or whatever number they're going to give to it, that it includes Apple Intelligence features. Apple Intelligence has not come to the platform so far. We haven't even really heard any rumors about it coming to new platforms this year, but I think Apple, as they're working on the personalized Siri, they want to make probably some more moves with Apple Intelligence, and I think it would make sense for it to come to tvOS as a platform. And the reason this is so out there is because it does depend on some other things happening, I think, because so far we've only seen Apple Intelligence really come to new platforms with specific processors, which of course the current Apple TV 4K does not have. So it's going to involve either Apple offloading some of those things to the cloud, but adding them to the software anyway, or finding a way to bring Apple Intelligence back to older processors, which seems unlikely based on RAM limitations, or potentially the most likely of all, which is still out there, is new hardware at WWDC. So somehow I think Apple Intelligence is coming to tvOS. I'm not going to put a stake on exactly how, but that's my out there pick.
I love it. I love it. It's a juicy out there pick as well, because no one's talked about it. And my out there pick, I've been back and forth on this for a while, but it is related. I tell you what it was going to be, and I chickened out last minute. My out there pick originally was going to be that Netflix is announced for TV app integration, given that it debuted earlier this year and then was pulled for no reason whatsoever. However, I just couldn't go full hog, and I knew it was going to upset you if I finally chose that pick after you have done for years, and I got the points. Instead, I'm going down the route that Apple TV 6th generation is revealed ahead of a full launch, possibly made available ahead of launch to developers. So if you're not a registered developer, maybe just on the off chance, it might be an idea to jump on board that train. But that's my out there pick. It would be very similar to what happened in 2015, although, and I correct myself here from a couple of episodes back, that early preview was only a month long. It was actually during the September launch event for tvOS and the new Apple TV in 2015, and then followed an October release. So developers had no time whatsoever. But if some of the things that we're talking about in these picks actually come to fruition, including the gaming aspect, I think those games, to get ready in time, are going to need access to a new, beefier processor. And I truly believe that in order to kind of get ahead of the game in that regard, Apple probably needs to get some kind of developer hardware out to them. But again, this is wish casting. This is very much getting hyped for something that might not happen, because every time we thought that, okay, the next step is going to be a real embracing of gaming and a real embracing of offline downloads and artificial intelligence and lots of heavy resource brought into Apple TV and tvOS, we've been let down most of the time. There have been some high points, but let's be honest, it's all been quite slow and steady. So I've gone from being pessimistic and very reserved to being very out there. But what a story that would be. New hardware, I don't think necessarily made publicly available, but to developers. So that's my out there pick. What do you think?
I think it's great. We've heard rumors about new hardware for quite some time now. I think it could come at any time, but if it is going to be such a major change, giving developers some time to get ready for it, I think makes a lot of sense as well. If they haven't already been seeded to developers and they just haven't been able to talk about, which is another option and could happen. But I think you can tell from our picks, we are very hopeful for this WWDC. We are very excited, and I can't wait to see everything that Apple has in store, not only for tvOS and Apple TV, but for all of its platforms. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I just can't wait to enjoy it and talk about it with you and everyone on the Mac Stories team and everyone else on social media and in Discord. Of course, there's going to be a lot to talk about, a lot to cover over the coming week, starting with the keynote on Monday. So if you want to keep up with all of it, we do encourage you to check out Mac Stories and our coverage there. We're going to have overviews of all the operating systems and all the awesome stories coming out of WWDC next week.
A very, very exciting time ahead. But let's talk about Apple TV releases for this week, starting with today. Not necessarily an Apple TV release, this one, but one that I think is notable because it's a release for Apple Watch, with the Global Running Day Challenge returning this year, where you are encouraged to complete a 5K run today, recording the run with any app that can record to Apple Health. And not only will you have earned your entertainment time this week, you have also earned the latest virtual Apple Watch reward celebrating Global Running Day 2025. Once you're all huffed and puffed out with that challenge, of course, you've got 3 episodes of Stick, our highlight this week, to jump into, and what a show it is. Alongside the penultimate episode of Karem, a show that's whizzed by so quickly, Devon. But on Thursday is a special day. It's our monthly Apple Arcade release day, at least for new titles and some notable updates.
Yes, this month we see Uno Arcade Edition, the official reimagining of one of the most popular card games in the world on Apple Arcade, as well as LEGO Hill Climb Adventures Plus, where iconic LEGO worlds and Hill Climb Racing's physics-based gameplay collide, Lost in Play Plus, an uplifting and wholesome point-and-click adventure, Helix Jump Plus, the classic 3D arcade bouncing game, and one that I know we're both very excited for, Sigmund, What the Car comes to Apple Vision Pro, and I can't even imagine what they're going to do with that game in an immersive format, but I'm so excited to experience it.
On Friday, we see new episodes of Murderbot and Long Way Home. And on Friday night, we see the return of Friday Night Baseball at 7 p.m. Eastern, with both Arizona Diamondbacks at Cincinnati Reds and Chicago Cubs at Detroit Tigers, a perfect example of a great use for multi-screen going back and forth between the two. And on Saturday, we see another game day on MLS Season Pass, followed by Sunday's Sunday Night Soccer, Portland versus St. Louis, LAFC versus Kansas City, and Vancouver versus Seattle, available to all.
Of course, on Monday, we also invite everyone to check out the WWDC keynote at 10 a.m. Pacific, available as always in 4K and spatial audio in the TV app, with an ASL version of the keynote available soon after the event. Then it's time for all of the nitty-gritty details with the platform State of the Union at 1 p.m. Pacific. It's available in the Apple Developer app on Apple TV and Apple Vision Pro, as well as on iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and online at developer.apple.com. So, a very exciting day of videos from Apple on Monday. Once we're done with all the excitement, Sigmund, ready to relax with our watch list, what can we check out in the TV app this week?
Well, I think try and get all of this watched before Monday. I think there's enough time. But we've got some great highlights, starting with The Surfer, a feature film that follows a man revisiting his childhood beach to surf with his son, but then he's humiliated by locals and he becomes entangled in an escalating conflict that pushes him to his limits. And with that description, you're probably thinking this is the perfect vehicle for Nicolas Cage. And you'd be right, because he is the main star, and it's a film that I've been waiting for ever since the very first previews. So really looking forward to checking that out. PVOD this week, The Surfer. Also coming to PVOD this week is Magic Farm, directed by Amalia Alman, starring Chloe Sevigny, Camila Del Campo, and more. It follows a media team that lands in the wrong country while perusing a musician's story, and they team up with locals to create viral content, forming bonds as a health crisis emerges in the background. A comedy is what I'm told, Devon. The premise at least sounds interesting, so I'm looking forward to checking this out. But yeah, maybe varying results. We'll find out. And finally, on Hulu this week, is the debut of Predator, Killer of Killers, a new addition to the Predator franchise following Prey, which was fantastic. This animated film follows a Viking raider, a ninja in feudal Japan, and a World War II pilot encounter a fierce intergalactic hunter. And I'm really, really excited to see how this universe has expanded and the animation styles involved. So 3 picks, all varying, all a little bit different, and all worthy of your watch lists this week. Beyond that, though, we have an up next pick for you this week. And I say an up next pick because this is a joint up next pick from the both of us. A film that I got to really enjoy in cinemas. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch this on IMAX. Hopefully, the home experience is going to replicate that in some ways. And of course, I'm talking about Sinners, making its TV app debut and available on PVOD this week.
Of course, Sinners comes from writer and director Ryan Coogler, stars Michael B. Jordan, Miles Caton, Haley Steinfeld, Wunmi Masaku, and more. This is one I didn't get to see in theaters, so I'm very excited that it's coming to PVOD. Of course, it follows a pair of twins who return home to Jim Crow South, only to find an evil lurking there that they never imagined. It's horror, it's got some fantastical elements to it, and based on the creator and the cast, I just can't wait to see this. I've heard amazing things about it. It really made a splash in IMAX theaters, and so I'm excited that it's coming home and it's going to be available to purchase in the TV app on Tuesday.
We talked last week about Bono and Stories of Surrender and how that IMAX format really works on Apple Vision Pro. I'm not expecting it on this release, but I'm really hoping that this is a film that, should Apple look to adopt the IMAX format for Apple Vision Pro, that this is one of them, because Sinners is not just the first film to be shot on IMAX, it is the first to be simultaneously shot on both Ultra Panavision 70 and IMAX 15:70 film, with Christopher Nolan and Emma Thomas providing guidance to Sinners director Ryan Coogler on how to utilize these large format cameras. And I think that was one of the most kind of jaw-dropping elements to this presentation, was, as we talked about last week, you get certain scenes were shot for IMAX and your jaw kind of hits the floor every time that aspect ratio changes. This is just that feeling but throughout. So I'm really looking forward to you getting to check it out. Definitely one that I think you stick on Apple Vision Pro if you are lucky enough. And maybe IMAX coming to Apple Vision Pro properly should have been one of my picks this week, but hey ho.
Well, we'll just add that in as a bonus wish segment, and of course, we'll have to check in on our picks next week. But that's all for us on this pre-WWDC week. We thank you so much for listening, and we want to hear what your predictions are for WWDC. You can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes, or you can reach out via our contact form, also linked in the show notes.
We'll be back next week with our highlights on new Apple original film Echo Valley, a recap on Your Friends and Neighbours, and Apple's WWDC 2025. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, and have a great week. And hopefully a very, very happy Monday morning.